We're going to show you how to install the Z-bracket lift on a Club Car DS. We have the body off of this car, but you do not have to remove the body. It's just easier for you to see if we have it off. You want to remove the stock front bumper, and then using the supplied template, you need to trim both the driver's side and passenger side of the front bumper. Of the front body for shock tower clearance. And you're simply just going to flip it and use the same template for the other side and simply trim the body. You can do this with a Sawzall or a jigsaw. And like I said, you can do this while the body is on the car. Using a 12mm wrench, which we already have these loose, you want to remove the 3 bolts from the steering shaft assembly. You want to save these bolts for reinstallation. The next step is to cut the templates from the template sheet and install them in the channel of the I-beam frame. And your template for the left front is the driver's side. You tape it into the frame. And your template for the right front is the passenger side, and it's securely taped to the frame. The next step is to follow the dotted line, and it is angled to help you with making a cut line to both the bottom of the I-beam and the top of the I-beam. Go ahead and mark across the top there. This is going to help you with drilling both driver and passenger side and keeping a straight line. And do the same for the passenger side. There's 8 holes we're going to have to drill per side, and the first step you want to do for each hole is take a center punch, and in the center of each hole you want to mark the frame to help you with your drilling. Ready to drill the holes in the frame. The first hole you want to make is with an 1/8 inch drill bit. And then once you have that through, enlarge that hole with a 3/8 inch drill bit. And do all 8 to the driver's side and all 8 to the passenger side. We're ready to cut the frame, and you want to make sure you have 1 to 2 people holding the front of the frame, because once you cut it, it's going to fall. So you don't want to fall and damage it, so you just want to drop it. You want to cut along the dotted line with a Sawzall, both the driver, and then when you're done with that, you want to cut the passenger side. Now we're just going to finish off the passenger side. Allows you to pull the front suspension away. Now using the supplied Z plates and 3/8 by 1.5 bolts, washers, and lock nuts, you want to loosely mount the J plates to the car to both the driver and passenger side. Got 1 J plate on the inside and 1 J plate on the outside. For the Z brackets loosely mounted, you want to slide the front frame into place in the center of the Z brackets and loosely mount with the supplied 3/8 by 1.5 bolts, washers, and lock nuts. Now we're going to loosely install the steering extension before we securely tighten the Z brackets. The steering extension comes with a new splined yoke. This part of your steering will not be reused. It could be either on the top or the bottom of the steering, depending on which side it's flipped to. And once we have it started, we can securely tighten all the bolts on the Z bracket. You need to securely tighten the steering shaft with the extension to the car
The bottom bolt's a new bolt that comes with the extension. It's a 1/2 inch. And then the stock top 2 bolts and securely tighten. Now using the supplied bumper and button head bolts, securely mount the bumper to the body and to the car. 2 holes on the top, 2 holes in the center, and securely tighten. Now the lift kit is done. You want to go back through and double check that all the bolts are securely tightened. When you go to adjust your toe of the car using a 3/4 inch wrench, this is the driver's side. This is a jam nut on the driver's side, and there's also one on the passenger side. You break those loose, and you can turn the tie rod and get whatever front end toe setting you want. We recommend you toe it in the front 1/4 to 1/8 inch in, and depending on where you put the steering shaft, you might have to remove the steering wheel by removing the nut and center your steering wheel after you're done. Now we're going to install the rear lift. You want to jack the cart up and place the frame on jack stands, and put a car jack under the rear swing arm or the rear differential. This will allow us to drop the rear once we remove the leaf springs. Remove the wheels and tires from both sides of the car. Remove the nuts that are holding the stock U-bolts to the car from both the driver and passenger side, then remove the U-bolts from the car. These will not be reused. Remove the nut that is holding the stock shock to the shock mount. Save the nut and bushings for reinstallation of the shock. Remove the brake cable holder from both sides of the car. This will allow the brake cable to drop and give us room to take the rear of the car apart. Save these for reinstallation. The next step is to jack the rear differential or rear swing arm up a little bit. This will take the weight off the leaf springs, which will make it easier for you to unattach the leaf springs. Unattach the leaf springs from both the front and rear leaf spring mounts. You want to save the bolts and bushings for reinstallation. Now that the leaf springs are loose, you want to take them off the car, and we're going to loosely reinstall them above the axle to the front mounts on both sides of the car. The next step is to install the supplied Allen cap screw with the Allen head up to the top of the stock brake cable mount, and using the supplied lock nut, securely fasten this to the stock brake cable mount. The next step is taking the rear riser, place it on the axle, and the stock pin from the center of the leaf spring will sit in the hole of the rear riser. Do this to both sides of the car. Take the supplied new shock mount with the rounded edge to the back and to the inside. Place on the leaf spring as shown, and the supplied U-bolt goes down through the shock mount. Down through your brake cable mount. And your Allen cap screw goes up in the center hole of the rear. With the supplied nuts securely tightened. Now that you got the rear lift and U-bolts installed to both sides of the car, using the stock shock bushings and nuts, install the stock shock to the new shock mount and securely tighten to both sides of the car. Using the stock bolts and bushings, reinstall the rear leaf spring to the rear leaf spring mounts. Securely tighten both sides of the car. Now that the rear lift is completely installed to both sides of the car, It's a good time to double check all your nuts and bolts to make sure they're securely tightened, and using the stock brake cable holder, reinstall to the front leaf spring mount on both sides of the car, install your wheels and tires, and you're done.